Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life? Like you're constantly bending over backward to please everyone. And somehow, somewhere along the way, you've forgotten who you really are? Maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop, to pause, and to begin the journey back to your true self. In this video, we're going to explore a simple yet powerful philosophy inspired by Denzel Washington's wisdom. One that has the potential to transform the way you see yourself, how you navigate your emotions, and how you reclaim the inner freedom you were always meant to have. Don't take your eyes off the screen, because the next 60 seconds might just make you look at your entire life in a completely different light. You're about to hear something that may completely shift the way you see the world and yourself. But what I'm about to share isn't about superhuman willpower. It's not about ignoring your real emotions, and it's definitely not about forcing yourself to stay positive when deep down you feel hollow. No, you don't have to pretend to be strong. You don't have to fight every negative thought as if each one is the enemy. The real key, the one that makes you unshakable in the face of chaos, that keeps you from being hurt by anyone or anything, lies somewhere much deeper. And it's not out there. It's within you. You've probably asked yourself before, why is it that some people, even after devastating loss, overwhelming crises, or the most uncertain chapters of life, still carry themselves with a strange calm, while others, in contrast, seem to fall apart from the smallest, most ordinary challenges? Is it luck? Were they just born that way? The answer isn't fate. It lies in something almost invisible, an unseen line between those who master their inner world and those who are imprisoned by their emotions. The biggest mistake we make is believing reality is objective, that what happens to us is simply truth, and our feelings are just natural reactions. But the truth is far more subtle. Every feeling you experience, every sadness, every surge of anger, every disappointment is filtered through a lens, your beliefs. Beliefs you've unconsciously carried for years. Emotions no one ever taught you how to truly sit with, understand, or heal. Imagine wearing color glasses. Even if the sky is blue or the flowers are bright, you'll only see them through that tint. If the lens is shaded with fear, resentment, or shame, then no matter how beautiful the world is, it'll always seem dark, dangerous, and unfair. Not because life is cruel, but because you can't see clearly, not when the storm is inside you. And here lies the most important truth, one most people aren't ready to face. The key is not in running from your pain, nor in numbing yourself to it. It's in transforming the meaning behind every experience. Like Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychologist, once said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Reframing how you see your life. That is what breaks the cycle. That's what gives you the power to step out of unconscious reaction and into conscious creation. Building on this foundation, that peace doesn't come from eliminating hardship, but from redefining our experiences. Let's now go even deeper to the source of it all, the way you perceive reality. Here's the problem. Most of us go through life unaware that the world doesn't just happen to us. We interpret it. We shape it through our perceptions. And the real danger is this. We don't just interpret reality. We program ourselves based on how we interpret it. If you've ever felt like your emotions are dragging you like a boat adrift in a storm, this is your moment to reclaim the wheel. Imagine being able to turn every emotion, even the darkest ones, into fuel for growth instead of chains that keep you stuck. Reality isn't imposed on you. It's created by the meaning you assign to the things that happen. And once you gain control over that process, once you're no longer at the mercy of unconscious reactions, you're free. Truly free. This isn't abstract theory. I'm not talking about vague, feel-good ideas. What I want to share with you are real principles, practices used by people who've genuinely experienced deep inner peace. These weren't superheroes. They were individuals who simply learned how to turn inward, to master their reactions, to get clear on their fears, and to transform those emotions into purpose. Nelson Mandela said it best. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. You'll learn how to turn confusion into clarity, to use fear as a compass, not a blade. And you'll discover a state where nothing outside of you can shake your core, a calm that no storm can touch. But hear this, what I'm about to show you will only hold power if you're ready to be radically honest with yourself. If you're willing to look at all the truths you've believed for so long and ask, am I really living my truth? Or am I just reacting to wounds I never understood? Now imagine a life where you remove those invisible glasses, ones that have distorted the way you see everyone, everything, even yourself. A life where you're no longer trapped by silent fears, buried beliefs, or suppressed emotions. The mind is like an iceberg. What you're aware of is only the tip. Beneath lies a vast ocean of memories, wounds, insecurities, and more importantly, the images you've unconsciously projected onto the world. The parts of you you've refused to face never vanish. They return as circumstances, as people, as limits you mistake for destiny. Think about it. How many times has fear crept in without you even noticing? It doesn't always arrive as panic. Sometimes it disguises itself as procrastination. Sometimes it wears the mask of, am I good enough, right before you try something new. Here's the part most people miss. It's not the unfulfilled dreams that hurt the most. It's the silence we wrap around them. Those unspoken desires show up in every corner of life. In our relationships, in half-hearted decisions, in the exhaustion that follows all the unseen effort. So often, we don't reject our dreams because we don't want them. We're just terrified of failing. So we stall. And that fear, it doesn't sit still. It quietly shape-shifts into something else. The fear of abandonment, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being unloved. And suddenly, we overextend ourselves. We give too much. We try too hard. All because of one thing. We're afraid of being rejected. Fear, like any emotion, is not the enemy. It's a teacher in disguise. A signal that something deep within us still aches, still longs to be seen and healed. But most people don't listen. They do the opposite, suppressing their feelings, telling themselves, I shouldn't be sad, I can't afford to be angry, I must stay strong no matter what. And that's exactly where the trouble begins. An emotion suppressed doesn't vanish. It mutates into a quiet burden, a weight you carry each day without realizing. It becomes the whisper you hear before falling asleep, the hollow feeling of loneliness in a crowded room, the inexplicable fatigue when you wake up each morning. It becomes a wall that keeps you stuck and you don't even know why you can't move forward. Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a storm. The wind howls, rain lashes down, the sky turns gray. You clench your fists, bracing against the wind. You shield your face from the rain. You push through, thinking if you're just strong enough, the storm will stop. But it doesn't. The harder you fight, the more exhausted you become. Because storms don't end when you resist them. They pass only when you surrender and let them move through. The human mind works the same way. Every emotion is like passing rain. It's not a life sentence. But instead of letting it come and go, we try to control it, shut it down, or escape it through work, distractions, fleeting relationships, temporary relief that never truly heals. And in doing so, we turn away from the very thing we most need to face. But what if you paused? What if you stopped running? Stopped brushing aside your sadness? Stopped locking your fear away? What if you found the courage to sit with the feeling, not asking, how do I get rid of this? But instead, what is this trying to teach me? That's when the miracle begins. Every emotion carries a hidden message. Sadness isn't here to punish you. It's a signal that you're clinging to something no longer meant for you. A failed expectation, someone you need to release, a part of you aching to be set free. Fear, it reveals your limiting beliefs. The belief that you're not enough, that you're unworthy, that failure is something to be feared. And anger, the emotion we most often bury out of fear of judgment, is actually a warning bell. It tells you your boundaries are being crossed, that something in your environment no longer aligns with who you truly are. So what if emotions aren't something to be conquered, but doorways leading you back to yourself? Would you be willing to step through? When you begin to shift your relationship with emotion, seeing it not as a burden, but as a companion, something remarkable starts to unfold within you. And from there, your outer world begins to transform too. I used to think I had to control my emotions, to hide them in order to appear strong. But I was wrong. Real growth begins when you turn inward, listen deeply, and allow your emotions to guide you, not hold you back. Think about how many moments in your daily life trigger unconscious reactions. Maybe it's a fight with a loved one, a clash at work, a moment when you feel hurt or lost. Most of us react instantly, yelling, withdrawing, blaming. But what if just once you paused, took a deep breath, stepped back, as if you were an observer watching yourself from the outside, and asked, what part of me is reacting this way? Is this really about the situation? Or is it a wound inside me that just got touched? The answers to those questions can change the way you live. Because once you realize the outside world can only affect you when your inner world allows it to, you begin to reclaim your power. This silent observer within us all, a part of our consciousness that doesn't get swept away by emotion or circumstance. It's the still point within, where even when the storm rages, you remain anchored. When you reconnect with that inner observer, you begin to understand no one and nothing can truly throw you off balance unless you let it. Every time you feel stirred up inside, it's not because life is unfair or people are cruel. It's because there's something in you that still needs healing. And that exact moment, when you turn toward yourself, is the doorway to real peace. Not by changing the world, but by changing the way you feel the world. Once you truly understand this, storms won't scare you anymore, because you'll know they pass. And with every passing storm comes a new chance to grow. If you look closely at the thoughts running through your mind each day, you'll see so many of them aren't even yours. They're things you picked up along the way, from others, from society, from old wounds, and accepted as truth. But the truth is, you don't have to carry them forever. Imagine, starting today, you begin rewriting the story you tell yourself. Instead of repeating, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve this, you plant new beliefs that you are capable, that you've never truly lacked anything. The only thing holding you back is the old story you haven't let go of. Many people used to think life was something that happened to them, a series of events they couldn't control, that all they could do was react. But as they went deeper into my healing, they saw something else. Every experience, whether painful or joyful, was shaped by how they programmed my mind. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. It simply responds to whatever you feed it. So think about this. If you constantly plant thoughts like, I'm not enough, or I'll never be loved, your subconscious starts living that out. It doesn't question you. It obeys. But if you start changing the inner script, feeding your mind with beliefs that empower and nurture, you begin to shift the world outside you too. Like putting on a new pair of glasses. The landscape stays the same, but the way you see it transforms. Let's take a very real example. Someone who grew up with the fear of abandonment. From childhood, they learned that love had to be earned through effort, through self-sacrifice, through silencing their own needs to gain approval. And that wound stayed with them. They grew up feeling not enough, always striving, always afraid of rejection. How do you break that cycle? The first step is to name it. This is the beginning of shadow integration, bringing the light of awareness to the hidden places inside. When that person realizes they've been led by fear, fear of not being worthy, fear of being left, they begin to reclaim their power. Because once you know that your worth doesn't come from how others see you, but from how you see yourself, your entire reality begins to shift. From there, they learn to set boundaries, to say no without guilt, to prioritize themselves without fearing loss. And something extraordinary happens. People stop coming to them for what they can give and start showing up for who they are. That's when the toxic cycle finally breaks. Let's consider another example. Someone who sees failure as shameful. Every time they try something new and it doesn't go as planned, they torment themselves with harsh self-criticism. They compare themselves to others. They feel stuck, convinced that life is building insurmountable walls around them. But what if they changed the way they looked at failure? What if each mistake wasn't a sentence, but a lesson in disguise? Suddenly, their entire relationship with life begins to shift. Life doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. If this person starts to see each fall as an invitation to learn rather than a reason to punish themselves, then fear begins to lose its grip. There are moments in life when we sit alone in the dark, tangled in quiet questions. Am I good enough? Strong enough? Lovable enough? Those questions don't come from the outside. They echo from seeds of doubt planted long ago. And unknowingly, we've been watering them daily, with fear, with insecurity, and with old stories about who we think we are. But just like any garden, things begin to change when we tend to it differently. When we stop nourishing the weeds and start cultivating hope, the landscape of the soul transforms. When you plant belief instead of fear, when you nurture trust in yourself instead of doubt, the world around you begins to mirror that inner shift. Someone who once feared failure no longer shies away from challenges because they've come to understand their worth isn't defined by outcomes, but by who they become every time they choose to keep going. No effort is ever wasted, as long as you learn something from it. When we stop measuring ourselves by material success and start looking at the spiritual lessons, each stumble becomes a stepping stone, not a roadblock. Here's a truth few ever speak aloud. Every thought you hold is a seed. If you constantly feed thoughts of resentment, doubt, and fear, they will eventually take root, grow deep, and block out your own inner light. But if you choose to plant peace, persistence, and confidence, a vibrant inner garden will begin to bloom. And this isn't some empty theory. You could try it right now. The next time a limiting thought shows up, don't rush to believe it. Pause. Look at it with the eyes of an observer. Ask yourself, is this thought really mine? Or is it just a voice from the past that someone once planted in me? When you're brave enough to no longer claim it as your own, you'll see those thoughts have no power unless you give it to them. The most beautiful part? You don't need the world to change for your life to change. All you need is a new relationship with what happens. A person who believes life is unfair will always find reasons to feel wronged. But another, who believes each moment holds a lesson, opens the door to a different world. A world where challenges become teachers and every day becomes a page of wisdom. What you resist persists. The more we resist life, with anxiety, resentment, and control, the more we attract the very things we fear. But when we choose to soften, to trust that everything has its purpose, we stop being swept away by the waves and begin learning how to ride them. Imagine a life like that, not ruled by fear of failure, because you've realized it doesn't define you. No longer haunted by other people's opinions, because you know the most important voice is your own. No longer paralyzed by the unknown, because you trust that whatever comes, you will be enough to face it. That is true freedom. Not the fragile kind dependent on circumstance, but a deep, enduring liberation born from within. We often mistake the chains that bind us as external, as if they come from judgment, expectations, or other people's opinions. But most of the time, the shackles are forged in our own minds. Once you realize that no one can imprison you without your permission, you'll understand. Real freedom isn't about changing the outside world, but freeing yourself from the limitations within. And it's in that moment you'll touch a peace you thought you had to chase. A peace that was never gone. It was always there, quietly waiting to be seen, accepted, and cherished. I used to live with a vague sense that something was wrong with me, but I couldn't name what it was. It took years to understand that when we run from the darker parts of ourselves, our fears, our pain, our buried emotions, they don't disappear. They shape-shift. They hide inside unnamed anxiety, in relationships that keep ending the same way, or in self-sabotage just as we're about to reach something we want. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. We cannot heal what we're unwilling to face. But when we find the courage to return, to listen, to understand the forgotten parts of ourselves, we realize the darkness isn't the enemy. It's simply the part longing to be seen. Think about a fear you've carried for years. Maybe it's the fear of rejection, of failure, or the quiet belief that you're not enough. Every time you step outside your comfort zone, that voice whispers, "Don't try. You'll fail again." But have you ever stopped and asked, whose voice is this? Maybe it was something said to you as a child. Maybe it echoes from someone you once admired who didn't believe in you. Whoever it was, wherever it came from, what matters most is that voice isn't you. It's an old recording looping in your mind, and you can choose to stop the tape, not by fighting it, not by running, but by pausing, listening, and asking, what is this fear trying to teach me? Maybe it's inviting you to trust yourself. Maybe it's reminding you that it's time to stop chasing approval from others and finally give it to yourself. Like walking into an important conversation with a boss, a partner, someone you care about. In the past, anxiety might have overtaken you. Heart racing, sweaty palms, mind blank. Maybe you try to hide it, or maybe you let it run the show. But this time, you choose a new way. You pause. You take a deep breath. You notice the feeling instead of drowning in it. And you ask yourself, what part of me is feeling this way right now? That single moment, when you stop reacting unconsciously and begin observing yourself with awareness, is when you step out of the old cycle and finally take the wheel of your own life. And then, in a moment of stillness amid the chaos of emotion, I asked myself, what story am I telling myself right now? That seemingly simple question slowed my heartbeat, softened my panic, and brought me back to myself. Because I realized the fear I was feeling didn't stem from the present moment. It was a residue of old wounds being reawakened. Wounds that, though covered in the dust of time, still lived quietly within me, waiting for a similar situation to rise again. So this time, instead of acting from insecurity, I chose to respond from clarity. I was no longer speaking words I didn't believe in, no longer pretending to be strong while falling apart inside. I spoke with presence. My voice no longer trembled, because for the first time in years, I wasn't speaking from a scar, I was speaking from the most conscious part of me. That's when the change began, when I stopped fighting myself, when I stopped pushing away the parts of me I used to label as wrong, and instead embraced them all, the light and the shadow. I finally stepped into a life that felt like mine. I slowly began to see the world through a different lens. Not to delude myself into thinking everything's fine, but to find stillness even while the world spins wildly around me. Like standing in the middle of a storm and discovering the eye, where the wind stops, the noise fades, and only peace remains. And I realized the strength I had spent so long searching for, in others, in achievements, in applause, had always been within me. I had just never paused long enough to truly see it. And once you've seen that truth, the world can no longer shake you the way it used to. You no longer need to control everything to feel safe, because you finally understand freedom doesn't come from controlling every situation. It comes from releasing the illusion that you ever had to. Imagine waking up one morning feeling completely drained. Not because you didn't sleep enough, but because you've been carrying something invisible, a quiet weight you've tried to ignore for far too long. Maybe it's a conversation you wish you'd handled differently. Maybe it's a cruel comment that keeps echoing in your mind. Maybe it's a mistake you still haven't forgiven yourself for. And you start to wonder, why, despite all my efforts, do other people's words still hurt me so much? Why do I keep getting haunted by memories I should have let go of long ago? The answer isn't out there. It's not about what someone else did. It's about how you've understood it, how you've carried that story inside you. This is where so many people get stuck. We believe that our pain comes from the outside, from circumstances, from people, from fate. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What bothers you on the outside is only a reflection of what remains unhealed within. The real liberation begins when we dare to turn inward, when we shine light on the parts of ourselves we thought were untouchable. That's where the healing begins. We think it's the harsh words that hurt us, the coldness, the silence from people we expected to care. But the real pain isn't in what was said. It's in the part of us that still doesn't believe we're worthy. It's not that they ignored us. It's that a part of us still screams for recognition we've never given ourselves. And until we look directly at the root of those emotions, we'll stay trapped in the loop. The same patterns, the same reactions, the same old ache that never seems to fade. But then one day, imagine you choose something different. Instead of reacting impulsively when you feel hurt, you pause. You take a deep breath, and instead of letting sadness, anger, or disappointment carry you away, you ask, why does this affect me so deeply? What part of me is reacting this strongly? And when you start to listen inwardly, you realize it's not them. It's not the situation. The real issue lies in the story you've wrapped around the experience. Take the fear of rejection you carry today. It didn't start today. It started long ago when you first learned to tie your worth to being accepted. Even guilt, so often mistaken for truth, is often just a habit, born from a distorted belief that making mistakes means you're not good enough. And in that moment, you begin to reclaim your power. Instead of being swept away by emotions, you ask, if this feeling is a message, what is it trying to tell me? Maybe it's telling you that it's time to believe in yourself a little more, to stop chasing external validation and start giving yourself the approval you've always craved. Maybe it's time to stop living by others' expectations and start building a life rooted in your own truth. The key isn't in what you feel, it's in how you choose to meet those feelings. So instead of feeding the negative spiral with the same looping thoughts, you choose to respond from a different place, from awareness, from understanding, from a deeper relationship with yourself. Picture another situation. You're in the middle of a heated argument with someone close to you. Words are sharp. Emotions are peaking. In the past, you might have yelled back, let the anger take over, and watch the relationship crumble. But this time is different, because the things that trigger us most in others are often mirrors, reflecting unresolved parts of ourselves. And this time, you choose not to react on autopilot. It's easy to lash out in anger. So easy, we don't even realize we're letting emotions drive our lives. One poorly timed comment, one careless action, and suddenly your heart is heavy and your mind is spiraling. But the truth is, we're not angry because of them. We're angry because something inside us hasn't yet healed. So I began to pause. I stopped being dragged into the storm of my own reactions. And I asked myself, what part of me is flaring up right now? Did this person really hurt me? Or is an old wound resurfacing? That single moment of reflection changed everything, because I was no longer the victim of my emotions. I became the one in charge. The miracle was this: I never denied my emotions. I still felt them, fully and honestly, but I chose to respond differently. Instead of flailing in pain, I turned that pain into understanding. And that small shift opened a massive door in my journey of emotional growth. I no longer felt trapped by my circumstances. On the contrary, every wound, every burst of anger, every wave of disappointment became a reminder to better understand myself. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The moment I began to live with awareness instead of impulse, I realized that many of the things that once confused me, hurt me, or even terrified me no longer had the same power over me. The world hadn't changed, but my perception of it had. That's when I discovered the most important concept of all: emotional responsibility. I realized that every emotion I experienced, every fleeting thought in my mind, every reaction I had toward others, each one was an opportunity to rewrite the story of my life. Not by denying how I felt, but by asking, how can I use this emotion to become stronger? Think about a recent moment when you felt hurt. Maybe someone ignored you right when you needed them most. Maybe someone said something that felt like an attack. This time, instead of continuing the victim narrative in your mind, try closing your eyes. Imagine that person not as a threat, but as an unexpected teacher, someone who showed up to illuminate a part of you that still needed to be seen. You might ask yourself, why did I attract this experience? What part of me needs to be understood and loved more deeply? And when you begin to walk that path, you'll uncover a profound truth. The lesson was never about them. It was always about you. You don't need others to validate your worth. You just need yourself. And that's the greatest freedom I've ever known. The truth is, we often search for peace in all the wrong places. In a perfect partner, a happy family, a stable job, or even in passing compliments. We convince ourselves, if only they would change, I'd be happier. Or, if the situation were different, I wouldn't feel this way. But have you ever stopped to ask, if we keep waiting for the world to change, will we ever truly find peace? I realized that what I'd been searching for was never out there. It had always been within me. I just never took the time to listen. The moment I stopped blaming others for how I felt was the moment I began to understand. Every emotion carries a message. And if I'm brave enough to decode that message, I can grow from the very things that once broke me. You know, peace isn't something you stumble upon on a sunny afternoon. It's not a reward for having lived a good enough life. It's something you cultivate day by day, like a garden tended with patience and understanding. The moment you realize that only you get to define who you are and how you feel, the world loses its power to shake your inner state. That's when you begin sending your brain a new signal. Those old fears, old anxieties, old resentments, they're no longer the only path. You begin rewriting your internal code, replacing limiting beliefs with something far more expansive and free. But here's where most people get stuck. They long for change, but they're still clinging to outdated definitions of themselves. I'm too sensitive. I'm not good at handling emotions. I always get affected by others. Do you see what happens? These repeated phrases become part of your identity, an invisible label stuck to your forehead. And when you believe it's true, you begin to live as if it is, playing out a role you never consciously chose. But what if you started questioning those beliefs? What if every time the thought, I'm too weak, showed up, you paused and asked, is this really true, or just something I believed for so long that I stopped challenging it? This is the real work, changing the story on the inside, not with hollow affirmations, but with new experiences that reinforce a stronger, more empowered version of you. True growth comes from integrating your shadows, from bringing the parts of yourself you once rejected into the light and facing them with open eyes. Not running from the pain, but sitting with it. Not discarding your wounds, but accepting them as part of your story. Because in the end, other people's words only hold power if you hand it to them. If someone says, you'll never make it, it only hurts if some part of you believes they might be right. But if you've done the inner work, if you've built unshakable trust in yourself, those words become background noise, meaningless, gone with the wind. And then comes the biggest question of all. How do you reach that place where nothing outside of you can truly hurt you anymore? There were times when I believed the best way to avoid pain was to suppress it, to pretend it didn't exist. I'd tell myself I was fine, that someone's careless words, indifferent glance, or cold silence didn't bother me. But the truth is, the more I buried my feelings, the more exhausted I became. It was like wearing a thin suit of glass, fragile, ready to shatter with the slightest blow. Real strength, I learned, doesn't come from avoiding emotions. It comes from meeting them with flexibility and grace. Not letting them consume you, but also not pretending they don't exist. It's about learning to feel everything without letting anything control you. True freedom comes the moment you stop identifying with every passing thought and emotion. When you can step back and observe them like clouds drifting across the sky of your mind, not clinging to them, not pushing them away, just noticing, that's when a new level of awareness begins to unfold. Imagine this. Maybe you've often felt like people take advantage of you. You give, and in return, silence or indifference. They used to infuriate you, make you feel invisible, unworthy. But now you pause and ask, why am I struggling to set boundaries? What makes it so hard for me to say no? That's where healing begins. Little by little, you begin to set boundaries, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. And then something shifts. You realize this simple but powerful truth. When you begin to honor yourself, others will follow. When you stop making concessions out of fear of abandonment, what you're really choosing is to protect your most precious gift, your inner peace. This is the point where many people retreat. They wait for the world to change, for others to be kinder, for life to stop testing them. But the truth is this: real change always begins within. When you change, the world around you reflects that new image back. Just like tuning a radio, once you shift your frequency, you begin to receive something entirely different. Not fear, insecurity, or frustration, but calm, confidence, and clarity. Now imagine what your life could look like if nothing could shake your inner balance. If every time someone tried to pull you in a conflict, you remain grounded. If, in every difficult moment, instead of reacting impulsively, you could observe with a sense of gentle detachment. If every emotion felt like just a passing wave in the vast ocean of your awareness, never strong enough to knock you off course. The peace you long for isn't some distant dream. It's not out of reach. It's the natural result of small, conscious choices, of moments of presence, of choosing to return to yourself again and again. Sometimes we mistake peace as a privilege, something reserved for when everything aligns, when people are kind, when life eases up. But that's a beautiful illusion. In truth, peace doesn't come from ease. It's built from within, brick by brick, each one a commitment. Each chisel mark a step towards self-acceptance. I used to hand over too much power to the world outside me. One critical comment could shatter me. One cold glance made me question my worth. One minor failure sent me spiraling in shame. I lived as though my identity depended on the emotions of others. But then I realized, if I kept living this way, I would never truly live. Change only began when I dared to break those invisible chains. When I stopped blaming circumstances, stopped waiting for others to change, and began building a fortress within myself. Steady, unshakable. And strangely enough, when I did that, the world suddenly felt lighter. The people who once terrified me became passing characters. The situations that once made my heart race now felt like a breeze brushing past. Not because the world changed, but because I had changed the way I saw it. When you taste true freedom, freedom from the expectations of others, from outdated beliefs, from the harsh inner critic, you'll never want to trade it for the comfort of approval. Because once you allow yourself to prioritize your happiness without guilt, everything else naturally falls into place. This is the process of individuation, the journey of returning to your true self, separate from the programming of your upbringing and environment. But this journey doesn't start with a dramatic event. It begins with a quiet kind of courage. The courage to listen to yourself in a world constantly telling you what to think, what to feel, and how to live. Think about it. How many times have you sacrificed what you truly wanted just to avoid disappointing others? How often have you silenced your emotions because you were taught that strength means never showing weakness? How many times have you played a role that wasn't yours, just to feel accepted? Each time, you didn't just betray your truth. You gave away another piece of your power, allowing the world to define your inner life. And that's when you need to begin practicing inner stillness. The human mind is a constant dialogue we rarely question. But imagine if every day you gave yourself just a few minutes to do nothing. Not scrolling, not planning, not rushing, just being with yourself. In that stillness, you might finally hear what your heart has been trying to say all along. Because in that silence, you begin to truly see what hurts, what needs healing, and what you've abandoned in your pursuit of others' expectations. Now imagine, someone throws a harsh comment your way. What then? How many times have you let one careless remark occupy your mind all day? Just a few words, yet they sting like arrows, leaving you shaken, upset, sleepless. We are often so easily wounded, not because the world is cruel, but because we're still so fragile within. That fragility is the dependency on how others see us. It's the vulnerability of emotions swayed by the outside. I used to react instantly to cruel words, as if someone had pressed on an old, unhealed wound. But now, instead of reacting from rage, I pause. I take a deep breath. Then I ask myself, does what they said truly reflect who I am? Or is it simply a projection of their own unresolved pain? That pause, when you step back instead of lashing out, is where transformation begins. You rise to a higher level of awareness, separating emotion from truth without hardening your heart. You're not cold, you're clear. Because what others say about you doesn't define who you are. You become the observer, not the victim of the emotional storm. I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl, the psychologist who survived the Holocaust. He once said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. But that space is not built overnight. It's cultivated day by day, moment by moment. Like a meditation student who learns not to stop the wind, but to root themselves deeper. When you live from this place, everything begins to shift. The people who once triggered your anger no longer have that power. The situations that once suffocated you no longer carry the same weight. You feel lighter, as if you've set down a heavy backpack of stones. But this doesn't mean you'll never hurt or feel sorrow again. Emotions will still come, but you'll no longer be trapped inside them. You stop trying to silence the waves and instead learn to let them pass. So, what can you start doing today? Something simple. Every time a strong emotion rises, don't react. Ask yourself, what part of me is being triggered? No judgment, just observation. Then breathe through it. Walk through it with presence. You'll see bit by bit, those emotions lose their grip on you. Because true peace doesn't lie in others' praise or perfect circumstances. It's created from within, through every thought, every choice, every quiet moment where you say to yourself, no one and nothing can take away the calm I've fought to build. That is true power. And once you feel it, the world will never look the same again. Finally, if you've stayed with me this far, I want you to know how much that means. It shows that you're genuinely committed to your own growth. We've just walked through a slice of life, where wounds no longer define you, but instead fuel your strength. Where inner stillness speaks louder than outside noise. And where you realize that true freedom doesn't come from controlling the world, but from understanding and mastering yourself. After this video, I hope you'll give yourself a few minutes, just to feel. Ask yourself one small, but life-changing question. What truly matters to me? Thank you for spending this time with me, exploring the deeper truths of life. I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. If today's story resonated with you in any way, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. And if there's something on your heart, a question, a struggle, or a story you're living, let us know. It might just inspire the next video. Don't forget to hit like, share this with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you never miss another moment of inspiration. We'll see you in the next video, where every story is a key to understanding yourself more deeply and living the life you truly deserve.